A reading from the Hudson Institute, hudson.org. Music provided by the Budos Band. Support vinyl from Daptone and related labels. They provide you a downloadable. The Naqshbandi-Khalidi Order and Political Islam in Turkey by Svante E. Cornell and M.K. Kaya. In the past 2 decades, Turkey has emerged on the global scene. It has enjoyed dramatic economic growth that has catapulted it into the exclusive G20 club of major economies, and under the rule of Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Justice and Development Party, the AKP, Turkey has enjoyed unprecedented political stability. For the past 15 years, the AKP has formed a single-party government, a remarkable feat given Turkey's tumultuous politics. The AKP's tenure was at first lauded in the West as the triumph of democratic forces over semi-authoritarianism. The AKP inherited a system in which Turkey's general staff and high judiciary often dictated terms to officials. But over time, the AKP moved to change Turkey. It steadily turned away from Europe, focusing on Turkey as a Middle Eastern power with a growing Islamist and Sunni sectarian ideological character. Over the past 5 years, the AKP has also moved on the domestic front, infusing the education system with Islamic themes. In scenes that would have been unthinkable only a few years ago, President Erdogan brandished his Quran at public rallies during the June 2015 electoral campaign, often beginning his remarks with Quranic citations. This article is not a study of the politics of the Turkish government. It is an inquiry into the religious and ideological environment informing Turkish political Islam. Turkish political Islam, and with it Turkish politics, is increasingly based on powerful religious orders and brotherhoods collectively termed tariqat and Sama'at, respectively. These communities constitute the deep structure of Turkish power and share a common ideological source. They belong to or stem from the Khalidi branch of the Naqshbandi Sufi order. While they differ from one another in interpretation and tone, the Naqshbandi-Khalidi order groups have formed Turkish political Islam, and through the AKP, the Khalidi worldview has become the dominant political force in Turkey today. With only slight exaggeration, the ruling Justice and Development Party, as well as the government it has led, could be termed a coalition of religious orders, a fact generally ignored by analysts of Turkish politics. This article discussed the background of the religious orders in Turkey, focusing on the Naqshbandi-Khalidi order before studying the various offshoots that have assumed important roles in Turkish politics today. The religious orders in the late Ottoman Empire and the early Republic. Religious orders and communities have played an important role in Turkish politics and society since the Ottoman period. These are part of, or offshoots from, the mystical Sufi tradition in Islam called Tasawwuf in Turkish. This tradition is based on receiving spiritual guidance from masters forming part of the chain of teachers going all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad. As a result, various masters formed congregations, some of which evolved into large orders, tariqat, that span countries and continents. In turn, these orders are subdivided into suborders or branches, kol, and further into the various lodges, derga. The Naqshbandi order is among the largest such orders in the world, and throughout history has played a critical role in the spread of Islam. In the modern period, there have been offshoots of these orders, which are not strictly Sufi congregations but religious communities of a more modern rather than mystical nature. The Nur movement and its offshoots, the Fethullah Gulen movement, is a case in point. The role of these orders has undergone several phases. Prior to the 19th century Western-style reforms, they were tied closely to the Ottoman bureaucracy. Importantly, however, they never played a direct political role. In the late Ottoman period, they gradually weakened as Western educational and secular principles gained ground. In the early years of the Turkish Republic, they were systematically suppressed from 1950 to 2002. They gradually re-emerged on the political scene, effectively usurping power from 2002 onward. The ebb and flow of the influence of religious orders dates back to the Ottoman defeat at Vienna and the ensuing military losses to Western powers. This set in motion a process of renewal and reform, which gradually led to the decline of the influence of the ulema, the clerical establishment. Paradoxically, the Orthodox Naqshbandi order initially benefited because the destruction of the Janissary Corps in 1826 also led to the closure of the heterodox and moderate Bektashi Order, which had enjoyed considerable influence in the bureaucracy. The Naqshbandi-Khalidi order filled the void left by the Bektashis in the bureaucracy and Ottoman intellectual life. At the same time, the growth of schools providing Western-style secular education negatively affected the Islamic madrasa system. This secularization threatened the influence of the ulema over the Ottoman Empire, motivating the religious orders in their ideological opposition to westernizing reforms. The purge of the Bektashis led the Khalidi suborder of the Naqshbandi order, named after Khalid al-Baghdadi, to briefly gain in importance. Baghdadi reformed this order in the early 19th century, dispatching a large number of disciples, 116 in all, to spread his teachings across the Ottoman Empire and beyond, including destinations as far away as Indonesia and Afghanistan. The impact of the order on the Turkish society and politics far surpasses what is usually assumed. Its ideas have exerted strong influence on numerous spin-off movements, including practically all of the politically relevant Islamic social movements in the country today. Almost all religious orders and communities in Turkey hail from the Khalidi order. The most well-known of them is the Iskenderpasa Lodge in Istanbul, which produced the Milli Gurus movement, the National Outlook movement, created in the mid-1960s, which produced Turkey's Islamist political parties and was led by Necmettin Erbakan. But this Menzil Nurku, including the Fethullah Gulen community, the Süleymansi, and the Isikici groups, among others, also all trace their lineage to the order. While the religious orders and schools saw their influence over politics and administration decline, in the last century of the Ottoman Empire, they mostly maintained their influence on social life. Moreover, the duality between the modern schools and madrasas gave them a role in education, but with the creation of the Republic of Turkey in 1923, the Sultanate and the Caliphate were abolished. In 1924, the Law on Unification of Education, Tevhidi Tedrisat Kanunu, similarly abolished all schools providing religious education. Following the 1925 Sheikh Said rebellion in the east led by Naqshbandi Sheikh, a November 1925 law closed all religious orders, lodges, and monasteries. This ended legal recognition of all religious orders. Furthermore, the transition to the Latin alphabet in 1927 curtailed the influence of religious figures on the state, and especially on the education system. This was not a coincidence. Ataturk and his followers explicitly sought to neutralize religious orders and brotherhoods, as well as the influence of their members. Naturally, this radical revolutionary secular movement generated a backlash. The religious groups were forced underground and adapted their strategies to a long-term struggle. Especially in the eastern parts of the country, where government writ was weak, the Naqshbandi brotherhoods continued their activities surreptitiously. As religious education was outlawed, many students went abroad for religious education, primarily to Islamic centers in places such as Cairo, Baghdad, Damascus, or Medina, and a significant portion of these students re-imported Salafi Islamist thinking and the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood upon their return to Turkey. While not as strong as in the Arab world, hardcore conservative views soon developed in Turkey and found expression in the political scene. Importantly, these ideas cross-fertilized with Naqshbandi-Khalidi order's views in spite of the order's Sufi status. In practice, the order's orthodoxy and politicized nature made it an ally rather than an enemy of the Salafi-influenced ideas, including those of the Muslim Brotherhood. The hardcore secularist policies of Ataturk's time, often termed Jacobin in nature, did not outlive him. Even in the period between his death in 1938 and the introduction of democracy in 1950, pressure on religious groups eased somewhat. With the advent of multi-party democracy, secularism surrendered its monopoly on power. The Turkish state rapidly adjusted to both the demands of society and those of international politics across society. Voluntary secular associations were weak, and Islamic groups constituted the leading organized political forces, rivaled only at times by leftist outfits and trade unions. Moreover, given Turkey's fear of Soviet encroachment, the state from the 1950s onward leaned increasingly on Islam as a bulwark against communism. This trend was true before the 1980 military coup, but it was greatly enhanced during the military rule in the early 1980s, when Sunni Islam and Turkish nationalism fused together to form a new state ideology. The governing elites always intended to retain control over religion. Gradually, however, they lost control to the religious brotherhoods and communities. More on this at the Hudson Institute, hudson.org/research, the Naqshbandi-Khalidi Order and Political Islam in Turkey by Svante E, Cornell, and M.K. Kaya.